She invited her friends to a farewell death party for her boyfriend, and he had no clue about it. In October of 1995, Joe Cinque was living in Australia. He was super close with his Italian family, and after college, he decided to travel. Joe ended up meeting a girl named Anu Singh who was a law student, and they ended up moving in together after a year. Anu dealt with self-image problems, and Joe was nothing but supportive towards her, but she didn't think so, and she would always get angry with him. According to her, Joe recommended that she take weight loss pills that models would take to keep their weight down, and once she did, she got all these side effects and blamed Joe for it. Things started to get worse for Anu when she told those around her that she wanted to harm Joe, her ex, and herself. But the ones that she told didn't think much of it and didn't say anything. At one point, Anu told a friend if they could get her a weapon so she could unalive herself, but they took it as a joke and didn't take it too seriously. Eventually, she decided instead of just only unaliving herself, she was going to unalive Joe as well. Anu's plan was to OD Joe with the substance. In October of 1997, Anu planned a farewell death party for Joe. The people that Anu invited to this party knew the plan of what was going to happen to Joe, but they were told not to say anything, and poor Joe had no idea what this party was even for. On October 24th was the first dinner party. Everything seemed to be going normal, and Anu and Joe seemed loving. That night, Anu tried to go ahead with her plan, but she did not deliver a sufficient dose to OD Joe. A couple days later, there was a second dinner party, and this is the day that Joe would OD from those substances, and the people at the party knew all along what was going to happen to him, and they still continued to stay to watch. On October 26th at 12:10 p.m., Anu had called the ambulance for Joe, and that's when they discovered that he had suffered from cardiac arrest. Anu wanted to make sure that Joe was actually deceased, so she gave paramedics the wrong address so that it would take them a little bit longer to come to save Joe, and once police arrived at the scene, she admitted that she gave multiple substances to Joe. Anu was charged and arrested with murder in October of 1997, but was released on parole in October of 2001, only serving 4 years. Once Anu was released from prison, she went back to school, and it seems like she is just living her life now.
She risked her life to track down the cartel members who unalived her daughter. In Mexico, the Los Zetas cartel kidnapped Miriam Rodriguez's 20-year-old daughter, Karen Rodriguez. The cartel said that they would give Karen back if Miriam and her husband paid the ransom fees. Miriam and her husband kept taking out bank loans and paying the cartel, but the cartel still refused to give Karen back. The police in Mexico did not want to help at all in this case and were not interested in handling anything. Miriam decided to go undercover to save her daughter. Unfortunately, Miriam found Karen tortured, unalived, and buried on an abandoned ranch. As a grieving mother, Miriam went undercover again and did the police officers' jobs for them. Miriam found and turned in 10 of the cartel members responsible for her daughter's kidnapping. Miriam also tracked down the woman who was responsible for torturing her daughter. Miriam held the woman at weapon point until the police showed up. Unfortunately, Miriam was now on the Los Zetas cartel radar. On Mother's Day, the Los Zetas cartel tracked Miriam down and shot her outside her home 12 to 13 times, unaliving her. Miriam's husband found Miriam laying face down in the street with her hand in her bag, clutching her weapon. A mother's love is truly an unstoppable force, and Miriam did not go down without a fight. What do you guys think of this case?
The American boy that visited North Korea and returned in a coma. This is the devastating and terrifying case of Otto Warmbier. I'm not lying to you guys when I say this is one of the most terrifying things I've ever heard. Otto was really that guy in high school and college. He was so smart, like head of his class. He was an athlete and even prom king. He loved to travel and was a huge risk taker, which is actually what led him to want to go on a trip to North Korea. As many of you know, North Korea is a dangerous and forbidden country. It's a dictatorship that heavily censors and shelters their people. And North Korea hates America and Americans, but at this time would occasionally allow America tourism. But after what happened to Otto Warmbier, America made it illegal to travel to North Korea. Otto was traveling to North Korea with a tour group company called Youth Pioneer Tours. Their slogan was literally destinations your mother would rather you stay away from. The trip was meant to be 5 days long, and they were staying at this really, really nice hotel, and that hotel had a 5th floor that was forbidden for them to go on. On the last night of their trip, the group that Otto was traveling with decided to go out for drinks to celebrate the new year, and when they got back to the hotel, a group of them, including Otto, decided they were going to try and sneak up to the 5th floor. And allegedly, Otto stole something from the 5th floor. North Korea released security footage that allegedly shows Otto removing a propaganda poster from the wall. It's highly debated whether or not this security footage is Otto. Many people believe that he was set up by North Korea. The next day, on January 2nd, 2016, Otto and his tour group were getting ready to leave North Korea. They were at the airport going through security when 2 guards came up to Otto and started leading him away. I don't think anyone at that moment really understood how serious the situation was. One of the members from Otto's group actually jokingly said to him as he was being led away, "Well, that's the last we'll see from you." And for the next 6 weeks, no one knew if Otto was alive or dead until North Korea aired Otto's confession on TV. To me, his confession seems clearly coerced and forced, and honestly makes 0 sense. He's crying, begging for mercy, and pleading to go home and be with his family.
I committed my crime of taking out the important political slogan from the staff-only area of the Angakdo International Hotel, aimed at harming the work ethic and the motivation of the Korean people. I understand the severity of my crime, and I have no idea what sort of penalty I may face. But I am begging to the Korean people and government for my forgiveness, and I am praying to the heavens so that I may be returned home to my family. I have been very impressed by the Korean government's humanitarian treatment of severe criminals like myself.
You beat Korea for your forgiveness. Please, I have made the worst mistake of my life.
The footage of Otto is honestly so sad and so hard to watch. He's only 21 years old, which is so young, and honestly, the point where I feel like your life really starts. But they still sentenced the boy to 15 years of hard labor in North Korea. I can't even imagine how terrified Otto was in that moment. Otto's family did not give up, though. They were fighting to have their son returned back to them, and after not seeing their baby for over a year and a half, North Korea agreed to release Otto back to America. At this point, we had no idea what Otto's condition was going to be like, but his parents were extremely hopeful. They waited anxiously as Otto's plane hit American soil, but quickly all hope was lost. Otto had to be carried out of the plane. He was in a coma with severe brain damage and tragically passed away less than 1 week later. To this day, we still don't have answers about what really happened to Otto in North Korea. Like I mentioned earlier, shortly after this, the United States did ban travel to North Korea, but I still felt like it was important to bring some more awareness to Otto's story. If you guys are still watching, thank you so much for listening to Otto's story. Please be safe. I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys tomorrow.
He tortured and SA'd his own daughter for 22 hours straight. 15-year-old Zara Burgess lived with her mother during the weekdays and visited her father, Joshua Burgess, on the weekends. What should have been a typical father-daughter visit turned into a 22-hour ordeal of psychological torture and SA. Joshua handcuffed his daughter on both her hands and her feet while she was completely naked. Joshua then proceeded to violently SA Zara for the next 22 hours straight. After SAing his own daughter, Joshua stabbed Zara multiple times across her body and then slit her throat, unaliving her. Shortly after Joshua unalived his daughter, he called the police, turning himself in. Joshua later identified that his main motives were lust, control, and a need for total dominance. The extreme brutality of this case and the prolonged torture led the district attorney to describe this case as extremely heinous, atrocious, and cruel. Joshua was sentenced to be unalived plus an additional 76 years in prison. It's honestly so hard for me to understand how a father can do this to his own daughter, but there are some truly, truly sick people in the world. What do you guys think of this case?
This man made millions of people, including me, absolutely petrified to go to the cinema. It was recently the 14th anniversary of this case, and still to this day, I am petrified to go in the cinema even if it's empty. It's the story of the perpetrator and what happened in that attack on the 20th of July 2012. James Holmes was born on the 13th of December 1987, and he was a 24-year-old former neuroscience PhD student at the University of Colorado. He had actually dropped out of uni not too long before this attack happened, after he failed some key exams that he would have needed to pass his course. The weeks before the attack, James Holmes legally purchased 4 firearms from different Colorado gun shops, including a Smith & Wesson M&P 15 rifle, a Remington 870 shotgun, and 2 Glock handguns. This man had also somehow acquired over 6,000 rounds of ammunition. Covering cases like this as somebody from the UK, specifically Scotland, where we have such strict gun laws, it blows my mind every single time that I cover a case like this or I look into something, and I honestly question why America's gun laws are still so relaxed. I don't know too much about it, so if anyone can give me information on why this is still a thing, then please feel free, because quite honestly, it blows my brain. On the 20th of July 2012, people were gathering in their crowds. It was the midnight screening of The Dark Knight Rises, and everybody was so excited to see it. Not long after the midnight showing had started, at approximately 12:38 am, James Holmes entered Theatre 9 of the Century 16 Multiplex in Aurora, Colorado. He had entered and basically propped open the door through an emergency exit. He entered wearing a ballistic helmet, a gas mask, body armour and gloves. He then detonated 2 tear gas canisters and opened fire with multiple weapons. Just moved up and down the aisles, just shooting into a crowd of over 400 people. A lot of people who were there actually said that they thought this was going to be part of the film, as if it was some sort of 4D or 5D experience, but it wasn't. It was something that they could not even comprehend was going to happen to them. This whole situation actually lasted less than 2 minutes. 12 people were killed, including a 6-year-old girl. There was also 70 people injured, 58 of them because of the gunfire, plus injuries from the tear gas and the panic that was just going on around everybody. James Holmes was arrested next to his car behind the theatre at 12:45 am. Remember, this started at 12:38. This is how fast that happened. His apartment, which was several miles away, had actually been booby-trapped with explosives, tripwires and other things that were designed to kill or incapacitate the first responders to go to his apartment. Those devices luckily were safely diffused and taken care of. When it came to his trial, James Holmes pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. He claimed that he had schizophrenia and psychotic episodes. Court-appointed psychiatrists were sent to evaluate him, but the trial went ahead in April of 2015. On July 16th of 2015, a jury convicted Holmes on all 165 counts. There was 24 counts of first-degree murder, 2 per victim, 140 counts of attempted first-degree murder, and 1 count of possessing an illegal explosive device. During the sentencing of this trial, the jury deadlocked on the death penalty. So on August 26th of 2015, the judge sentenced him to 12 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He was also given 3,318 years for his remaining charges, and he remains incarcerated till this day. America's sentencing is something that I find so interesting compared to some of the lenient sentences that we have in the UK. The Aurora shooting prompted increased conversations about theatre security, safety measures nationwide, and also debates on gun access. This is something that I spoke about earlier that I genuinely still don't really understand. How has America had so many events like this and so many things that have happened and killed so many people, but it's still legal to just walk into a shop and purchase a gun? Let me know what you think about this case. Have you been afraid to go to the cinema after this happened like me? Any other cases, please feel free to DM me or comment below. I have actually covered this case before, but I thought with the anniversary we could remember the victims' names, which I will put on the screen just now. Thank you all so much for being here, and I will see you in the next one.
I feel like you can see it in her eyes. I don't think there's anything more sick than watching someone slowly die in front of you, filming it and laughing at them. It was February 2020 in Winter Park, Florida. Sarah Boone and Jorge Torres had been dating for a while, but this was a very on and off toxic relationship. They'd both been accused of DVing the other one multiple times. There'd been numerous incidents where they'd both been arrested for this, but it was one of those situations where they'd both just forgive each other constantly and sometimes even bail each other out of prison. There was strangulation allegations, there were battery allegations, but for some reason they stayed together throughout all of this. They also dabbled in substances and a lot of alcohol, and this would obviously just add fuel to the fire and make everything just 10 times worse. And they would move in together, they would move out, they would move back in together. They were basically in a trauma bond, in my opinion. But this would all come to a very abrupt end on the 24th of February when Sarah called 911. Now, she explained to the operator that her boyfriend was dead. She explained that the pair had been drinking and thought it would be a really funny game to play hide and seek together. And she explained they both thought it would be funny if Jorge got into a suitcase to see if he could get out. But she was then a bit vague about what happened next and said that she went upstairs while they were playing this game and she just fell asleep, and then she came back in the morning and he was dead. This obviously sounded so suspicious to officers, and when investigators raced to the scene, they found the victim deceased as expected in that suitcase, and they seized Sarah's phone. And they really weren't expecting to find as much as they did on Sarah's phone, but it would ultimately reveal a totally different series of events than she explained. Videos on the device absolutely stunned officers, and I honestly can't believe that anybody could be so evil. The pair were not both laughing at this silly game. He was actually zipped inside of the suitcase, begging for his life. Sarah was quite clearly aware that he couldn't breathe. He was literally saying to her, "Please, I cannot breathe." And she was taunting him. As he begged inside for help, she laughed at him, stating, "That's what you do when you choke me, and that's what I feel like when you cheat on me." Now, this totally blindsided the officers. Not only was this a horrifically cruel murder, but Sarah had documented the whole thing. And when they confronted her about this, she denied all knowledge. She said she didn't remember anything. She'd had a bottle of wine, she'd fallen asleep, she couldn't recall doing anything of the sort. Obviously, armed with the video footage, it was fairly straightforward for the prosecution to demonstrate the actual series of events. Sarah's defense argued that due to the abuse she had received, it was kind of a form of self-defense, sometimes known as battered person syndrome. And I think people definitely can kill people in retaliation or self-defense when they have been abused, but this was such a cruel and sadistic kind of punishment turned murder that they'd just never seen anything like this before. She was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison.
He stabbed his math teacher 16 times and then used her credit card to go watch a movie. That teacher was 24-year-old Colleen Ritzer, a beloved educator at Danvers High School. She stayed after school that day in October of 2013, helping students in grading papers, something she was known for. But one student had other plans. That student was 14-year-old Philip Chisholm. And according to investigators, what happened next wasn't random. Earlier that day, Philip walked into school carrying a murder kit. Inside were gloves, a mask, a change of clothes, and a box cutter. Let that sink in for a second. A 14-year-old showing up to school with a murder kit. It's absolutely insane. But it gets worse. After classes ended, Philip followed Colleen into the girls' bathroom. Once she was inside, he attacked. He strangled her and then stabbed her at least 16 times in the head and neck with a box cutter. Then he raped her. And if that wasn't horrifying enough, what he did next is almost impossible to process. Security cameras at school captured Philip calmly wheeling a recycling bin down the hallways. Inside that bin was Colleen's body. He rolled it outside into a wooded area behind the school.
But even that wasn't the end. Once he reached the woods, he pulled her body out of the bin and sexually assaulted her again using a tree branch. He left a note behind that read, "I hate you all." And then he went on with his night. He changed his clothes, he used Colleen's credit card, and he bought a movie ticket to see Gravity, just hours after killing his teacher. Later that night, police found him walking along a highway. He still had the blood-stained box cutter and several of Colleen's personal belongings on him. As the full story began to unfold, the case quickly shocked people across the country, not only because of how brutal the crime was, but because the person behind it was just 14. At trial, Philip's defense team argued that he was suffering from severe mental illness and hearing voices. Prosecutors pushed back, stating that the evidence showed planning and intent. The jury ultimately agreed with the prosecutors. Philip Chisholm was convicted of first-degree murder and armed robbery. Today, he's serving a life sentence and won't be eligible for parole until he's in his 50s. What did you guys think about this case? Leave it down in the comments below.
This year will mark 4 years since her death, and the person responsible for this is still on the loose. Itzel Espinosa was born on September 27th of 2003 and was from Phoenix, Arizona. Itzel was aspiring to be a model and a social media influencer on Instagram. At the time, she was 17 years old and she was about to start her senior year of high school, but she was hanging out with the wrong crowd. On Thursday, July 1st of 2021, Itzel left the home to go hang out with some friends. As the hours were passing by, Itzel's father was not able to reach her, and this resulted in him calling the police to report her as missing. Just a few days later, on Saturday, July 3rd, around 5:30 a.m., police responded to a call regarding a deceased body of a teenager found inside of a car parked in an alley. Investigators later confirmed that the person that was found inside of that car was Itzel. It was later revealed that on July 1st, Itzel had gotten into a fight with a girl named Lindsay Aguilar. They had previous issues from the past, and that night it turned physical. Itzel had ran to a random car that was parked nearby. She got inside and locked herself in. Lindsay ran behind her and banged on the window, demanding that she get out. 19-year-old Jesus Padilla, who was supposed to be Itzel's friend, handed Lindsay a 9mm handgun at her request. Lindsay then fired into the front passenger window multiple times, unaliving Itzel. Jesus was arrested and took a plea deal, and he was sentenced to 13 years in prison. As for Lindsay, she hasn't been caught, but the police believe that she is in Mexico hiding. Sending many prayers to Itzel and her family that she is able to get the justice that she deserves.
He was only 14 when he SA'd a 91-year-old woman. 14-year-old Jessie Stone was a teenager who was extremely addicted to online porn, according to his family. In June of 2024, before midnight, Jessie broke into his neighbor's house. His neighbor was a 91-year-old woman. Jessie found the woman's iPad, made himself really comfortable in her living room, and then proceeded to watch porn on her iPad for the next 15 minutes. Jessie then went to the woman's bedroom. The woman woke up and tried to fight Jessie, but Jessie put a pillow over her face and hit her in the head multiple times with his fists. Then, Jessie began to brutally SA this 91-year-old woman for the next 20 minutes. The woman ended up surviving Jessie's attack. Officials claim that this crime was an act of unimaginable violence, and the victim was very lucky to still be alive. The woman actually knew Jessie well. She had previously considered him a good boy and actually thought of him as her friend. Jessie had also mowed her lawn for her in the past. Jessie was sentenced to 25 years in prison, followed by 30 years of probation. This story honestly just proves that you never really know your neighbors, no matter how nice they may seem. What do you guys think of this case?
She vanished after going to see H in concert in Birmingham. This was a huge mystery until police found something horrific in a local park the following day. It was September 2019 in Tamworth in Staffordshire. Hayley Bunker from the local area had just celebrated her 20th birthday. She was an absolutely beautiful young girl, as you can see. She had a lot of friends and she loved to socialise. Family described her as vibrant and caring. She loved just hanging out with her mates, getting dressed up, particularly going to music concerts. And it worked out pretty well that on the 19th of the month, the rapper H was in concert in Birmingham. So on the night in question, Keely and her friend went to the event and they really enjoyed themselves. They wanted to keep the night going, so they decided to go to a nightclub nearby called Snobs. And the girls were seemingly having a very fun, normal night out together. They were surrounded by friends. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. One of the friends in attendance was 20-year-old Wesley Street. Now, I feel like as women, we're told to be very cautious of men on nights out, trying to keep ourselves safe. However, this Wesley had been friends with Keely since they were literally in like infant school. They were childhood friends, so she had no reason to believe that she wasn't safe around him. Now, they all headed back to Tamworth in a taxi together before being dropped off to go to their various addresses. And Keely's friend Monique actually offered her to sleep over at her house if she wanted. However, Keely replied, "I've got Wes, he'll walk me back, it'll be fine." She trusted her old school friend to walk her and get her back home okay. But on the way back, he convinced her to do a detour. Now, it's not 100% clear how he did this, but one of the theories is that he may have said that he wanted to go for a smoke and suggested passing through the local rugby club on the way. And I feel like this is pretty standard, isn't it? When you're walking home with friends, especially if you've had a drink, you'll often just kind of do a detour to a shop or something like that. But the alarm was raised when she failed to turn up to an interview that she had scheduled for the following day. Now, this was totally out of character, so her dad was so concerned he reported her missing to police. Now, friends Keely had been with on that night all told police the same thing. The last person she was with was Wesley. So Wesley was quickly brought in for questioning, and he confirmed, yes, he had walked her home part of the way that night, but he said that he last saw her at a phone booth. He kind of dropped her off there, which seemed odd. But he did seem to be pretty cooperative with police. He was kind of giving them all of the information that they were asking of him. They did notice something very unsettling about Wesley though. He had scratches on his face. Now, they noticed this. They thought, that's a little bit fishy. But they just thought noted and they moved on. It could have been a coincidence, but it was incredibly unnerving. But it wasn't long before a devastating discovery was made. The following evening around 9 p.m, Keely's body was lying face down in a pool near the edge of Wigington Park. Now, as prime suspect, Wesley was arrested and officers were able to scour through local CCTV and phone GPS information to disprove his tale of events. His timings didn't add up, the route he claimed he took did not add up, so why was he lying? Now, CCTV captured the pair by Tamworth Rugby Club at 4:23 a.m, which Wesley had totally left out of his story. Keely's bag was also found a short distance away, indicating that something had happened there, causing her to drop her bag. Wesley's jacket was also found in the park where Keely's body was discovered, and it was heavily caked in makeup. And I guess the final kind of nail in the coffin for Wesley was that his DNA was found on Keely during the post-mortem, which proved that he had R'd her. Evidence showed that he choked her to death before hiding her body under branches, then casually just going home to bed. Shockingly, in court, he was also found guilty of 5 further S offences which took place in 2015, 17 and 19. Now, he tried to weasel his way out of this and change his story. He tried to say that he and Keely had engaged in consensual S and he'd accidentally killed her during this time. Thankfully, the jury saw through this and he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison.
How does a healthy 17-year-old end up dead inside of a rolled-up gym mat at school and nobody sees or hears anything? That's exactly what happened to Kendrick Johnson in 2013. And what investigators found next only made the case more disturbing. On January 11th, students walking into the gym at Lawrence High School noticed something horrifying sticking out of a cluster of gym mats. A pair of human feet. At first, they thought it might be a prank, but when the mat was pushed over, the truth became clear. Kendrick's body was wedged upside down in one of the mats. The mats were nearly 6 feet tall and stored standing upright. Kendrick was trapped head first into the narrow center, with his arms pinned beneath his body. According to investigators, Kendrick had climbed on the mat to grab a pair of athletic shoes he shared with another student. Some students later said that sometimes people threw their shoes into the mats to keep them from being stolen in the locker room. But almost immediately, People began questioning that explanation. Surveillance footage from the gym showed strange time gaps and weird timestamps. Some cameras were missing large chunks of recording time, and none of them clearly showed the space where the mats were stored. That area was essentially a blind spot. Then came the autopsies. The state's medical examiner ruled Kendrick's death as an accident, but the pathologist hired by the family said the injuries suggested blunt force trauma to the head. And when Kendrick's body was exhumed for that second autopsy, something else shocking was discovered. His internal organs were gone, and his body was filled with newspaper. The funeral home said they never received the organs from the coroner. Despite multiple investigations over the years, authorities have continued to rule Kendrick's death as an accident. What did you guys think about this case? Leave it down in the comments below.
They were raising a chimpanzee as their child, and then the unthinkable happened. This is the disturbing case of Travis the chimp. Sandy and Jerry were a successful married couple and very well off financially. After a playful encounter with a chimpanzee at a rodeo, Sandy became obsessed with the idea of owning one herself. Sandy and Jerry found a breeder of chimpanzees in Missouri and bought Travis when he was only 3 days old. Travis's mother had to be tranquilized so they could go in and steal Travis from her, which I'm sure was really devastating and traumatic. Chimpanzees are actually our closest relative, and we share about 98% of the same DNA. Sandy and Jerry bought Travis for $50,000 and weren't even legally required to have a permit to keep him as a pet. They actually didn't even see Travis as a pet. They raised him like a son. That was their baby. Travis was an adorable little baby. He went with them everywhere they went. He was also a really smart little chimp. He learned how to ride a bike, mow the lawn, and even drive a car. By all accounts, Travis fit in quite nicely with the human society he was being raised in. Travis loved to watch TV. He loved watching sports. He ate candy and ice cream and drank wine with his dad nearly every night. Travis even went to restaurants with Sandy and Jerry. Travis was a local celebrity in this town. Everyone knew Travis and loved him. As Travis got older and stronger, he began to act out more and cause more issues. But it was always overlooked because Travis was always so playful and lovable. They never thought he would actually hurt someone. Jerry got really sick and had to be hospitalized, and he told his wife if anything ever happened to him to put Travis in a sanctuary because he was too much for her to handle alone. Jerry unfortunately did end up passing away, and his wife Sandy did end up finding a chimp sanctuary in Florida. She wrote them a really loving letter asking if they had space for Travis. She included family photos and a donation check. She signed the letter, sealed it, stamped it, but she actually never ended up sending that letter. I think in Sandy's mind, she knew that keeping Travis was wrong, but in her heart, she couldn't let go. After losing her husband, Sandy became depressed and detached. Travis was really all she had left. And Sandy wasn't the only one affected by Jerry's death. It left Travis extremely depressed. Chimpanzees are really complex emotional creatures. Travis was smart, but he couldn't understand why his best buddy, the guy that he drank wine with and cheered watching baseball with, was here one day and gone the next. Travis was actually so depressed that a local doctor gave him Xanax. And then on February 16th, 2009, the life of Travis the chimp took a dark turn. That day, Travis was agitated and not listening to anything Sandy said. He was outside the home and refusing to go back inside. So Sandy ended up calling her best friend of 30 years, Charla Nash, for help controlling Travis. Charla agreed to come over and help Sandy with her chimp. Charla had known Travis since he was a baby, but she had recently dyed her hair and looked a little bit different than maybe Travis remembered. So when Charla got to the home and exited the car with one of Travis's favorite toys, he charged her and began to attack her. Travis was 13 years old at this point and over 240 pounds and believed to have the strength of 5 adult men. Travis began to rip Sharla apart, blood everywhere. Sandy did her best to save her friend, but Travis was not listening to her, so she called 911 for help. I'm gonna put in a clip of that 911 call. It is so scary. You can hear Travis in the background.
Where's your emergency?
This is Sandy. 241 Rock Crimin Road.
What's the problem?
Send the police. Send the police.
What's the problem there?
The chip killed my friend.
What's the problem with your friend?
Oh, please.
What's the problem with your friend? I need to know.
Send the police up with a gun. With a gun. Hurry
Who
up.
has a gun?
When the police arrived, they were forced to unalive Travis. Sharla was miraculously still alive, but her hands and her face were nearly completely gone and she had lost over half of the blood in her body. That day, Sharla was in surgery for hours. There's some photos available online of what she looked like, but personally, I don't feel comfortable sharing them. It was a brutal scene. Even the hospital staff that was treating her needed counseling afterwards. Eventually, Sharla had a face transplant, and compared to how she looked after the attack, it's incredible how good she looked after the transplant. She had a young daughter at the time in her care that had to end up living with a friend because she was in treatment for so long. Today, she's permanently blind, but she is so incredibly strong and a huge voice and activist against keeping wild animals as pets. Travis's owner, Sandy, passed away about a year later, and her estate awarded Sharla over $4 million in damages. I feel so terrible for Sharla, but I honestly also feel really bad for Travis as well, because he should have never been kept as a pet in the first place. I wanted to share this case today to bring awareness to how dangerous, irresponsible, and honestly cruel keeping wild animals as pets is. I know there's a lot of people on this app specifically that share their exotic pets. I'm not coming for any individual. I'm just saying personally, I think it's wrong. If you do feel differently, let me know in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on this entire case if you'd want to see similar stories in the future. If you watched the end of this video, thank you so much. Let me know in the comments that you saw this. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you guys tomorrow with another video.
There is something so deeply sinister about how this woman died, yet for some reason, no one is talking about it. This is Mitrice Richardson. In 2009, she began acting really strange at an upscale California restaurant, and when she couldn't pay her bill, she was arrested. I mean, her behavior was so odd that multiple people at the restaurant noticed. But when she got to the police station, the officer said that she seemed totally normal. So normal that they released her at 12:30 in the morning with no phone, no purse, no way of getting home safely. This was 40 miles from her home. This was in a remote, mountainous area that Mitrice was not familiar with. She disappeared after this. Yet 11 months later, her remains were found in an extremely rugged area deep in Malibu Canyon, with no explanation of how she got to this specific spot. Her skull and spinal cord were severed from the rest of her remains, and the area where she was found is adjacent to a 21-acre farm known for producing corn, an area where many residents heard screams coming from right after Mitrice went missing. The craziest part is that police say no foul play is involved, that Mitrice was not a victim of murder, but I don't believe that. This is hands down a case that will make you question everything, and if you want to go down a rabbit hole, stick around and let's talk about it. This is Mitrice Richardson. She was only 24 years old when she mysteriously disappeared and died in 2009. Just 4 months before she died, Mitrice graduated from California State University Fullerton with a bachelor's degree in psychology. She was incredibly smart, and some of her main passions were singing and dancing. She was also a beauty pageant contestant, and she was just about to apply to graduate school. Her absolute dream was to become a child psychologist, and she really wanted to work with kids in the foster care system. Everyone who knew Mitrice described her as a ball of energy, and it didn't matter who you were. she loved you. At the time of her death, Mitrice had been dating her partner, Tessa Moon, for about 2 years, and they were really happy together. On top of this, she was an intern for a forensic psychologist and a part-time dancer at an LGBTQ+ club. For her full-time job, she was a secretary at a freight forwarding company in Santa Fe Springs. So she had her hands full, but she preferred it this way. This brings us to September 16th, 2009, a day that would forever change Mitrice's life. That evening, Mitrice left work early. Her boss said that she seemed normal, but that she was overly happy and seemed excited for something. He described her as floating around the warehouse. Not concerning, but definitely a little bit different than how she normally acted. After she left, she drove her Honda Civic to her aunt's house, but she wasn't home. This is when Mitrice's behavior starts to get more bizarre. She ends up leaving a bunch of her business cards all over her aunt's front porch, even stuffing them into plants. And then she leaves a written note on her uncle's car, and it doesn't really make sense. It said, quote, "Who is queen now, Mississippi?" End quote. After this, Mitrice ends up driving to a restaurant called Joffrey's, which is a really upscale coastal restaurant in Malibu that a lot of celebrities like to go to. But from the moment she pulled into the driveway, her behavior began getting worse. The valet driver at the restaurant said that her car was in complete chaos, and it looked like it was ransacked. But then Mitrice climbed into the valet's car and started looking through his CDs. At this point, she didn't seem well, so he asked if she was okay, in which she replied, quote, "It's subliminal." End quote. She proceeded to talk to him about the language of numbers and asked if he understood what she was saying, but he said no. She then said, quote, "Well, I'm here to avenge Michael Jackson's death." End quote. Once she got into the restaurant, her behavior became even more bizarre. The host sat her at a table alone, in which she ordered a really expensive $65 steak. And then at one point, she got up and actually sat herself at a different table where a large party was already seated. And she tried talking to them, but only in riddles. At least to them, right away it seemed like Mitrice was mentally ill. She kept talking about hearing voices and needing to crack a code. So not only do you have employees of this establishment concerned for her well-being, now you have other guests concerned too. They said it was clear that Mitrice was not drunk. She was definitely suffering some sort of mental health crisis. At one point, Mitrice tried to walk out of the restaurant without paying her $89 bill, and she told the host, quote, "I don't have to worry about my meal because God told me that it would be taken care of," with the language of numbers that makes sense. End quote. Obviously, the manager tried to hold her and tried to find somebody to help pay her bill, but Mitrice's phone was out in her car, and the only number she remembered by heart was her great-grandma Mildred's. Now, Mitrice lived with Mildred at the time she disappeared in South LA, but Mildred was 91 years old, so when the restaurant called her, she said there was no way she could drive down there on her own. As this was all happening, Mitrice was telling the manager that she was from Mars, and that she planned to have sex with him that night. When he showed her the bill, he said that it seemed like her eyes just melted, kind of like she was in a trance or something, and she was fixated on the number 8. So all of the restaurant employees talked to each other and felt like the best thing they could do for Mitrice would be to call the police. They didn't want to get her in trouble, but it seemed clear like mentally something was going on, and she just needed help. They thought if they called the police, they would help and take care of her. Sadly, they were very wrong. So once police arrived, they issued a field sobriety test to see if she was intoxicated, which she was not. In fact, she had no drugs or alcohol in her system at all. Authorities decided to search her car, and there they found less than an ounce of marijuana. But in the trunk, they found other things as well. And this was all witnessed by staff at the restaurant. In the trunk were empty pill bottles, 2 full gallons of Smirnoff vodka, and a case of beer and tequila. As this was all unfolding, the valet asked the police what was wrong with Mitrice, in which the officer replied, quote, "She's a ding." End quote. And this is a really important detail because I guess this is a pretty common saying within law enforcement, and it's used to describe people struggling with their mental health. So with that being said, it must have seemed clear to even the responding officers that Mitrice was struggling mentally. They said the only way they could help her was to arrest her. So they did. They handcuffed her, put her in the back of the squad car, and booked her at the Malibu Lost Hills Sheriff Station. They left behind all of Mitrice's personal belongings in her car, so her phone, purse, and money. And then her car was towed away to a tow yard. On the way to the police station, which was about 20 miles from the restaurant down dark, windy, mountainous roads, her mom called the police. She had been notified by Mildred that Mitrice was acting strange, and she was looking for some sort of update. Her mom was super concerned because this behavior did not sound like Mitrice. And she even made a joke to the officer that said, quote, "She's not from that area. I'd hate to wake up to a morning report about a girl lost somewhere with her head chopped off." End quote. She just kept asking them if Mitrice was going to be held overnight or not, because if she wasn't, she needed to come get her. But the officers at the station reassured her that they were going to be holding Mitrice all night and promised her that she would be safe, that they wouldn't release her until the next morning when it was light outside. But sadly, this was not the case. In fact, nothing about what happens next makes any sense. So according to the officers on duty, when Mitrice arrived to the station around 10 p.m., she seemed totally normal. They said nothing about her behavior was unusual and that she was coherent and polite. They also said that no one had informed them that she'd been acting bizarre at the restaurant. The biggest question I have is, what changed? In a short period of time, she goes from acting really erratic to now normal. They ran her information and found that she had no criminal history. And feeling like they couldn't enforce a 5150 hold, they let Mitrice go. They released her into the dark at 12:30 in the morning, knowing that she didn't know the area and that she had no phone to call for help or to get a ride home. What's strange is that the arresting officer said that no one at the restaurant told him that Mitrice was acting strange, which was a lie. And on top of this, he didn't even include any of what happened at the restaurant in his incident report. So now it's 12:28 a.m. on September 17th, 2009. Mitrice is released from the police station because they said she seemed just fine, but they never even performed a mental health evaluation. According to them, they offered for her to stay in the lobby, but she declined. A few hours later, now 5:30 in the morning, Mitrice's mom calls the police station to see when she can come and pick up her daughter. And it's only then that she finds out that they let Mitrice go hours earlier without notifying her like they promised. Now, so much time has passed and no one knew where Mitrice went after leaving the station. But about an hour later, they get their first clue. This is when Mitrice was seen in the backyard of a former KTLA news anchor, Bill Smith. Bill lived in Montanito, so this was about 6 miles from the police station where she was released. This likely would have taken Mitrice about 2 hours to walk. And keep in mind, it's pitch black out because it's the middle of the night and she doesn't even know this location. He tried asking her if she was okay, and all she said was, quote, "I'm resting." End quote. Bill called this into the police not knowing who Mitrice was at this point. But again, it seems like the police didn't really care. They showed no signs of urgency coming out to check if this was Mitrice or not, which her family says is unacceptable. Later on, it was confirmed that this was Mitrice. But at this point, it was too late. Where exactly she went after this or what happened to her has never been explained. Mitrice officially became a missing person after this, and it wasn't until months later that full-scale searches were conducted. Eventually, though, in January of 2010, the LA County Sheriff's Department conducted a thorough search, which was actually the largest in its history. Over 300 volunteers trained in search and rescue operations were brought in, as well as tracking dogs. They searched by land and air and scoured Malibu Canyon, all 18 square miles of it, which included every creek, trail, and ridge. Investigators found footprints that belonged to Mitrice in the mud, and it was really strange because they indicated that she went from walking to running. So it seems like she was very scared of something or someone. But other than this, no trace of Mitrice was found. In the summer of 2010, her family came out and conducted another massive search over 2 days. This concluded an additional 100 volunteers. Again, they found no trace of Mitrice, but they did find something really disturbing. Inside of a culvert was freshly graffitied racially and sexually offensive remarks. It's never been proven that this was connected to Mitrice, but it was incredibly fresh and in the areas they were looking for her, so it could be. It would take 11 months of Mitrice being missing before any other discoveries would be made, and this time it was even more horrific. On August 9th, 2010, her naked, mummified remains were found in a creek bed, deep in an area known as Dark Canyon. Her body was found by park rangers who were searching for an illegal marijuana farm in an unrelated case. This was a really remote and rugged area, but it was only 6.5 miles from the police station where she was released from the night she went missing. Her belt, bra, and jeans were scattered hundreds of feet down the ravine. And most disturbing of all was that her skull and spinal cord had been detached from the rest of her remains. Her socks, shoes, and underwear have never been found. Neither either have some of her bones. Oddly enough, one of her bones that has never been found is her hyoid bone. This bone can indicate whether or not someone has been strangled, but the location of where she was found is what makes this case so strange. First off, it is really hard to get to, so it seems nearly impossible that she would have been able to get there on her own in the middle of the night. But where she was found was actually adjacent to a 21-acre ranch that is known for producing corn. It's super secluded, but it has direct access to the creek bed where Mitrice was found. And even stranger, several residents in the area heard screaming coming from this property in the days after Mitrice vanished. So all of this together seems like something really sinister happened to her. But get this, the coroner specifically ordered the LA County Sheriff's Department to leave Mitrice's remains right where they are until they get there so they can properly examine her body and the scene. That's protocol, because you have to assume foul play is involved before ruling it out. But what do the police do? The same ones who released Mitrice, even though she was clearly having a mental health episode, removed her body from the scene without waiting for the coroner, completely going against their orders. Ultimately, and with reasons I just do not understand, the LA County coroner ruled Mitrice's cause of death as undetermined. They don't know how she died, but authorities have ruled out foul play. They say Mitrice is not a victim of homicide, but her family and so many others do not believe this ruling. Everything from the very beginning screams either botched or cover up. And what's crazy is that for the longest time, police said they had no video of Mitrice in custody the night she disappeared. But months later, they admitted that they did. But they were sure that it showed nothing strange, which, again, is not true. When her family finally got to review the footage, it very clearly showed Mitrice acting strange while in police custody, completely going against everything they said. They said they released her in the middle of the night because she seemed fine. That was a lie. And so many people backed that up. But what's really concerning is about 2 minutes into the video after Mitrice is seen leaving the station, another person is seen leaving, almost like they walked out after her. It took 12 years and for a news station to track this person down, and he ended up being a deputy at the station. He said he had never been questioned about Mitrice at all in that 12 years, and he was adamant that he never saw her that night. I don't know if I believe him given the track record of this police station, but what's really sad is that on top of this, authorities ended up leaving some of Mitrice's bones out in the wilderness. I don't know if they didn't see them or just forgot or what, but at one point, Mitrice's mom went out there with a private investigator, and she ended up finding one of her daughter's finger bones under a rock. I truly do not get how that happens, but that's not all. Even more happened that has left me speechless. So on the day that Mitrice was set to be buried, the private investigator found a bag of Mitrice's clothing, the one she was wearing when she disappeared, inside her body bag. And get this, these clothes were never sent off to a crime lab to be tested. So at this point, so much evidence was either lost, never tested, or destroyed. Some think Mitrice was a victim of foul play just based on how her body was discovered. It seems like someone had to have put her there. And I guess when she was found, one of her arms was tightly flexed against her chest, almost as if she had been restrained for a period of time. Years later, her family even exhumed her body, yet no answers were ever found. To this day, her cause of death remains undetermined, and there's been no justice. Mitrice was failed so many times by the people who were supposed to protect her. Her parents filed a civil lawsuit against the county, and they ended up receiving $900,000, but that doesn't bring Mitrice back. They pushed for the case to be reviewed by the California Attorney General's office, but in 2017, they concluded their investigation. They said that no one, not even the police station that released Mitrice, was legally responsible for her death. Her family believes that Mitrice suffered from some sort of undiagnosed mental disorder, likely bipolar, and a psychologist working on the case said that it seems like Mitrice was having a manic episode the night she disappeared. After reviewing her social media and phone records, they think it's even possible that Mitrice went 5 days without sleeping before she disappeared. According to her family and girlfriend, Mitrice never showed any signs of mental illness growing up. It wasn't until right before her death that she started doing little things that, in hindsight, could have been mental health related. She would sometimes text her mom bizarre texts that just didn't make sense, but then she would always have some sort of answer that would kind of explain it away. The psychologist that she was interning with said that sometimes Mitrice's behavior was a little bit concerning, but it was always very subtle. Absolutely no one knew that it was going to escalate like this. While all of that may be true, one thing is for sure. Mitrice was failed by the people meant to protect us. For reasons unknown, they didn't want to hold her that night, even though it was very clear that she needed help. And now she's she's not here when she should be. I don't know what happened to her after she left the police station that night, but it's clear that whatever it was very sinister. Her mom fought for a very long time trying to figure out what happened to her daughter, but sadly, she passed away last year, never knowing. It's now been 17 years, and whatever really happened to my Therese that night in the woods remains a mystery.
This girl, who was a model on a certain adult website who called herself Fake Barbie, stabbed her boyfriend to death hours after he tried to end their toxic relationship. When this case happened, I don't remember there being any coverage of it in the UK. This case is literally insane to me. This is the case of Abigail White. Abigail is a 24-year-old mum of 3 living near Bristol in the UK. Her boyfriend, 22-year-old Bradley Lewis, was the dad to her 3 children. On paper, from the outside looking in, you might think that they had a picture-perfect family. In reality though, this was a volatile nightmare of a relationship that ended in a complete disaster and murder. Going back to the start of her life, Abby didn't really have it easy in life. Her parents split up when she was quite young, and her stepdad soon moved in with her mum. He was physically, emotionally, verbally and sexually abusive to her for years. Authorities eventually stepped in and she was put into foster care, but her school life was nothing short of chaotic. There was exclusions, pupil referrals, fights, instability everywhere. By 13, she had turned to drinking alcohol and using substances to try and cope. She claimed as well that taking these substances and drinking made her feel better. As she grew older though, this trauma did not go away. This shaped her into someone with massive trust issues, anger problems and just a pattern of intense controlling behaviour when it came to any relationship. As far as I'm aware, she actually knew her boyfriend Brad for a little while before they got together. They got together when she was around 18 years old. Their relationship pretty much from the very start was described by friends, family and people who knew them as highly volatile, toxic as hell and violent. Both parties cheated, both were abusive and both were violent. Abby would later allege in court that Brad was controlling towards the money that she had made on that adult platform and that he was the abusive one. However, the evidence shown in court just showed that the abuse was going both ways and pretty much more from Abby's side. She had actually stabbed him in the arm. It was completely fine, it was more like a superficial wound, just days before she killed him. In the days leading up to the events of what happened that day, she sent threatening voice notes and messages saying, quote, "I'm going to stab you, one of us is going to end up dead." She later admitted in recordings to her friends that she believed she was fully capable of killing him but didn't want to end up in prison. Brad had actually told his friends that he was scared, that he felt unsafe and he wanted out, and he'd actually been staying with his mum during this time. Despite all of this going on though, they just kept getting back together. I feel like we see this in a lot of cases, especially with younger people, but not so much, it could be older people too. It's almost love mixed with hate that people can't let go of. They're stuck in a constant cycle in an abusive relationship. On the 25th of March 2022, Brad met Abby in a park. He basically told her straight that day, "I'm done, I don't want to be with you anymore," and Abby was devastated to say the least. They somehow end up together at a local pub with friends. I don't know if maybe he had went himself and she had showed up. I don't really understand how they went together, but regardless, Abby was drinking heavily. Wine, Jaeger bombs, rum and coke, vodka, everything. She was also on stimulant illicit substances. She was just causing chaos though. She was starting fights, pouring drink over people, arguing with Brad. CCTV captured all of this and it just sounded like complete and utter chaos. Abby seems like the type of person, you know the people that they are, that you know if you look at them the wrong way, they're going to say something. That is the kind of vibes that she gives me. Around 7:50 p.m, the pair leave the pub together and they go back to Abby's house. Now, literally 20 minutes later, at around 8:10 p.m, Abby stabs him once in the chest with a kitchen knife. The blade went 7 centimeters deep, straight through a gap in his ribs into his heart. Brad collapses to the floor and Abby was starting to scream for help. A neighbour rushes in and finds him on the floor bleeding out. Abby told a neighbour and later police and a friend that he actually stabbed himself. She calls 999 and lies repeatedly about what had happened, and Brad sadly died in hospital the next day because of the injuries inflicted upon him. Abby was obviously arrested because I don't think many people actually believed her story. At first, she completely denied stabbing him and kept on the story that he had stabbed himself. Later on, she admitted manslaughter but on the grounds of diminished responsibility, claiming that this was due to borderline personality disorder and emotional issues caused from trauma that affected her control. She would later tell the jury in court that she only picked up the knife to shock and scare him during their argument that they had that night. She said she had no intent to kill or harm him and said that it happened in a tussle before she realised what she'd done. The prosecution were able to prove her intent though. There was history of prior threats between them. Their phones and her voice notes to her friends basically proved everything. The prior stabbing as well, the anger that she showed that night in the pub, everything showed that she meant serious harm. This did not just seem like an accident. After a 2-week trial at Bristol Crown Court in October of 2022, the jury unanimously convicted Abby of murder. Judge Mr. Justice Fraser gave her a life sentence with a minimum of 18 years and he told her, quote, "You're a controlling person and you're also very violent." He also noted that the kids would grow up knowing their mum murdered their dad. Brad's family was obviously devastated and they described him as a popular, caring young guy with his whole life ahead of him gone. This case for me is a strange one, to be honest. I don't know how this flew under the radar for so long with social services and stuff, and police, I don't know why none of the friends reported it, but I understand that it's maybe one of those things that you don't want to get involved in. This shows as well that abuse sometimes isn't always one-sided. It can come from two different parties, and one choosing to walk away can be the most dangerous thing that they can do. This is just my reminder to you, if you are in an abusive relationship, reach out for help because there is charities and people who will help you. I never usually give my opinions on these cases. I usually just state the absolute facts. I just wanted to highlight here though that by no means am I saying what Abby done was right. She is disgusting for what she done. But I can't help but think if the correct help had been put in place for her, for all of the trauma she received, would this have happened? I guess I'm not giving an opinion, I'm more just stating that more needs to be done for people in these situations so things like this don't happen. Thank you all for being here and watching. Any case suggestions, please DM me or comment down below and I will see you in the next one.
A once picture-perfect high school romance would end in a tragic death. Let me paint the picture for you. It's fall, it's football season, Friday night, lights beaming at the football stadium, student section is rowdy, everyone is excited for the game. In 2014 at Central High School in Knoxville, Tennessee, 14-year-old Emma Walker was the only freshman to make the cheerleading team that year. Emma has been described as passionate, fun, kind, and caring. She loved cheerleading, she loved the stadium, she loved the team, she loved her school, and her passion for it would show. She had such a good energy about her, so when junior football player Riley Gow saw her on the sidelines, he quickly developed a little crush. Riley was the wide receiver of the football team. His friends described him as a little bit of a jokester. He loved to play video games, obviously loved football. He was your classic popular boy next door. At the time, Riley had a girlfriend, but he broke up with her to start dating Emma. The two of them became the cutest couple at school. Football player, cheerleader. They got along like a house on fire. Emma's parents met Riley. Great first impression. Her mom, Jill, has said, quote, "He came in very polite, very nice in the beginning. He was very, very likable." Her father, Mark, has said, "I thought he was a very nice looking young man, well-mannered." Emma's friends also really liked Riley. They were so happy for her. Emma would post pictures of her and Riley on her social media all the time, expressing how lucky she felt to be with someone like Riley, and Riley would post pictures of her expressing the same thing. But soon after, cracks started to show in their relationship. The first very noticeable red flag to Emma's parents was when Riley decided that he was going to take his ex-girlfriend to prom. Yeah, he was going to take his ex and not his current girlfriend Emma because he said that he promised his ex that he would take her and he didn't want to break that promise. Very weird. Riley also showed no effort when it came to getting to know Emma's friends, and at first they thought it was maybe because he was shy, but then he started to isolate Emma from her friends. Not only did he not want to hang out with them, but he didn't want her to hang out with them either. Classic toxic behavior. Emma's friends and family slowly but surely began to notice how controlling, jealous, and possessive Riley was. One of her friends has said, quote, he got more possessive and more clingy towards her, and he wouldn't let her do certain things, quote. That behavior obviously became concerning. Riley began to tell Emma what she could or could not wear, began to tell her who she could or could not hang out with. He would sit outside her work for hours just waiting for her to get off. He would call her all the time, text her all the time, monitor her behavior really. And for the next 2 years, their relationship would remain extremely unstable. The couple was often breaking up, having intense arguments. Riley would be extremely disrespectful. He would say things such as, quote, I hate you, I hate everything about you, you're the biggest I've ever come in contact with. He once even told Emma, you are dead to me, I will check the obituary. But then, of course, every single argument would follow up with him drowning her in compliments. He would tell her how sorry he was for all the things he said and did. He would beg on his knees practically, saying that he was so sorry that he loved her. Every single argument and every single insult was followed by an apology. Emma's parents noticed the toll that this relationship was having on her, and they would express their concerns to Emma, and they would even try to convince her to end the relationship for good. They banned Riley from coming over to the house. They took Emma's phone so she couldn't communicate with him, even though they still found ways around that. And then they just flat out told her that she was not allowed to see him anymore. But Emma, being a teenage girl, she was 14 years old, a little older now. The more and more that people were telling her that she couldn't be with Riley, the more that she wanted to. She loved him, or at least she thought that she did, because he did such a good job at manipulating her, and she would always want to make her way back to him. And I will say, unless you have been in a relationship like this one, you won't understand, because it really is blinding, and there's nothing that anyone can say or do to make you realize what's happening right in front of you if you don't want to. Like, if you have experienced that, it honestly really is mind-blowing. Like, this should be a science experiment, how blind you can feel and you do not realize it. Moving on, by the fall of 2016, Riley had graduated. He was an 18-year-old freshman at a nearby college. It was only like 30 minutes away, and Emma was 16 years old. Now in her junior year of high school, they were still together. By that point, her parents thought that enough was enough, and they grounded Emma. They told her that she was not allowed to leave the house unless it was to go to school or to go to cheerleading practice. The parents did this in hopes of making her realize that she needed to end the relationship with Riley for good, and it worked. Emma finally realized that she did deserve better. She started seeing Riley for who he really was, and she was done with him. She started being her old self again, spending time with her parents and her friends again, and the people who loved and cared for her were so happy that they would finally have the old Emma back. However, Riley, realizing that Emma was drifting away from him, only became more psychotic. Riley played victim. He would tell his friends that he was so sad and so heartbroken, he would often have thoughts of hurting himself. In November of 2016, Emma's parents allowed her to go to a friend's house for the night. While she was at her friend's house, Emma started getting random texts from a random number saying things such as, quote, go to your car with your keys. Go alone. I've got someone you love. If you don't comply, I will hurt them. If you'd like to hear his crying and screams, give him a call. Emma's telling her friends about these messages, and everyone's like, what? What is this? So they go outside. Riley is on the ground, lying face down, looking like he just woke up in a daze, and Riley says, I don't know what happened. I don't know how I've got here. I've been kidnapped. Someone dropped me off here. I don't know what's happening. Where am I? How did I get here? And Emma is like, what? Why are you here? Riley faked his own kidnapping. He pretended that he got kidnapped and dropped off at that front yard, coincidentally right by the house that Emma was at. He faked the entire scenario just to get attention. Very weird. Honestly, very pick me. The next morning, Emma drives her home, and as they're driving in the neighborhood, they see a strange man dressed in all black. They thought it was weird, but Emma's friend dropped her off and then she left. Not long after, while Emma is home alone, the strange man dressed in all black walks up to her house, to her front door, and starts ringing the doorbell over and over again. And Emma is terrified. I mean, I would be too, because that is so strange and creepy. She's home alone, she's scared, and Emma texts Riley and she says, I hate you, but I need you right now. And then he comes over. He comes over to play hero and act like he's saving Emma, but let's be honest, Riley was the strange man dressed in black. When Emma's mom got home, she pulled into her house and she sees Riley there talking to her daughter, and Jill, the mom, thought, seriously? He knows he's not allowed to be here. What is he doing? She got out of the car and told him to leave. Riley pushed back and said, I'm here to make sure that Emma is okay. I need to stay here to make sure that Emma is okay, but the mom was not having it, and he did eventually leave. The weird situations only made Emma's parents be more wary. They were worried about their daughter. They were constantly watching her, observing her every move, driving her to and from work to make sure that she was safe. November 20th was a Sunday. That night was normal at the Walker household. Emma texted back and forth with one of her friends about a homework assignment, and then she went to bed a little after midnight. We find out later that night, before she fell asleep, Riley was texting and calling her, and Emma was expressing that she had absolutely no interest in getting back together with him. Riley then blew up her phone, calling her over and over again, but his calls and texts went unanswered, and Emma eventually fell asleep. In the middle of the night, Emma's dad, Mark, woke up because he thought that he heard the sound of a door slamming. He got out of bed, he checked on Emma, who looked to be fine and asleep in her bed. He checked on his son, who was also fine and asleep in bed. He brushed it off, went back to sleep. The next Monday morning, a little after 6 in the morning, Emma's mother, Jill, went into her bedroom to try and wake her up for school, but Emma wasn't waking up. This is how her mom has described that morning, quote, "I said her name, didn't hear anything. I bumped her leg, didn't hear anything, and then I looked at her face and realized. I checked for a pulse and I couldn't find anything. I don't remember a whole lot from that. I know that I called 911. When Jill realized that her daughter's face was pale and her lips were blue, she couldn't find a pulse, she hysterically called 911 and told them that her daughter was 16 years old, that she was not waking up, that she couldn't feel a pulse, and she begged for an ambulance to come immediately. When authorities showed up, 16-year-old Emma was no longer alive. Emma's parents, families, and friends were absolutely devastated. That night after her death, they held a candlelit vigil at Central High School, and her teammates on the cheer team released balloons in her memory. Initially, there looked to be a possibility of Emma having unalived herself, but that made no sense. The scene was taped off as a crime scene, and when investigators looked closely, they noticed a small hole in the wall of her bedroom right by her bed, a hole from a weapon. That weapon was used to go through the wall and into Emma's head, unaliving her. When they went outside, they noticed another hole and further evidence that there had been a weapon fired. Someone had done this to Emma. Someone went after her that night to intentionally unalive her, and it had to be someone that knew where Emma's bedroom was, where her bed was set up in her room. Someone who knew exactly where she would be. The more investigators kept questioning the people who knew her, the more and more the same name would keep coming up, her ex-boyfriend, Riley Gall. An investigator said, quote, "Everyone kept giving us the name Riley Gall because of their relationship, because they had seen the way that Riley had treated her, the way that he would talk to her." On social media, Riley was pretending to be mourning like everyone else who loved her, but investigators had a strong feeling that he was the exact suspect they were looking for. Riley's friends were worried about him because he was not acting right, and when talking to investigators, one of his friends named Alex told law enforcement that Riley had told him that he had stolen one of his grandfather's weapons. Another one of his friends told investigators that Riley had asked him how to get fingerprints off of a weapon. Suspicious. Investigators were moving fast. They were on it. They brought Riley in for questioning on Monday to talk about his whereabouts for the past 72 hours. The interview could not have made him look more guilty. He was so unsure about where he had been, he couldn't even say for sure if he spent the night at his friend's house or not. During the entire 2 hours that he was questioned as well, not once could he refer to Emma as Emma. He wouldn't say her name. He would just call her the girl. Investigators said that he was acting, quote, emotionless. Riley's friends knew that something wasn't right. They could tell that Riley was not acting like himself, and they had a very strong suspicion that he was the one responsible for ending the life of Emma. The friends teamed up with investigators. They worked with them to get a confession out of Riley and to recover the potential murder weapon. Investigators wired up his friends with microphones, a transmitter where police could listen in, and a hidden video camera. And their operation worked perfectly. Riley trusted his friends. He took them to recover the weapon and had plans to dispose it, but right as they were getting ready to throw the weapon in a body of water to hide it, undercover police raided the scene and arrested Riley. In court, after 5 hours of deliberation, jurors found 19-year-old Riley guilty of first-degree murder as well as stalking, theft, reckless endangerment, and being in possession of a during a dangerous felony. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 51 years. In court, to Emma's family, Riley Gall stated, quote, "I'm sorry I took Emma away from you, that I robbed you from the experience of watching your daughter grow up. What I can do is tell the truth about that night. I just wanted to scare her. I never meant to take Emma's life. Again, I am so sorry." This story is a very sad reminder of how scary toxic relationships have been. Nobody could have prevented this. Her parents did everything they knew to do. They tried to protect her, but unfortunately they could not. It breaks my heart. But thank you guys for spending time with me today, for listening to Emma's stories. Remember to be kind to people. I hope you guys are all having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.